Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this kind of retake, kind of new ground, because we had some audio difficulties with our last presentation. And so we're going to redo a little bit of what we said then. And then we're also going to move on into some new ground that came up at the end of the session last time, and we didn't have an opportunity to pursue it.
You make a mystery. Last time, with whom, about what?
Oh, you can take care of those details. I just get the big picture. Yeah.
On the other side of don't want to say the pond, but the other side of Europe, there is Elena Urbanovsky. Say hello.
Yes, hello Heidi, hello Mark. It's so nice to be back.
Yeah.
And we, in the previous session a week ago, it went live and we did it on another platform. And unfortunately, the audio was not very good. We were talking about her journey, Unspeakable, the book she has written about her journey, the journey into the unbroken heart. And I think maybe it wasn't completely understandable with all these breakups in the audio. And that's why we thought in the first part of this transmission, to give her the possibility to retell a little bit of what was so important for her. And then later we see, no? Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Elena.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heidi, for inviting me again. And where to start? Like, I just want to shortly refer that in 2013, I had an emotional breakdown. And the book is basically about what happened in this breakdown to break through. So that means it's mainly about an inner journey, and it addresses all the unresolved emotional content which I had accumulated in my body doing my almost 50 years of lifetime. In this time I was 46. And the book basically is telling about this inner journey in a little documentary part, but most of the part in poems. And I wanted to address not the facts about my story, but I wanted to speak about, again, the process which I went through, because I find it very significant for what happens in this time in humanity. And this emotional breakdown which happened was confronting me in my inner with everything what I had avoided to feel. That means everything from a quite traumatic childhood till 46, which I didn't feel safe to feel in my body, the emotions in my body. So the book speaks about the shame, the guilt, the fear, basically about everything what we don't like to speak about and what we don't like to feel.
Yeah, and just to interrupt you, the first episode was on this website, the wisdomfactory.net/Elena-Urbanovsky. And you can also find the book there and can download it. Okay, that's just for the information.
So thank you very much, Heidi, for mentioning that, so that the audience can have access also to the book, which is downloadable, so you can get it for free and connect with my journey, which I call a universal journey. Because I think there are many women, because I'm a woman, I wrote this book as a woman, can relate to the content of the book, to their own emotional content within their bodies.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I just want to really clarify, this breakdown was a result of my not willingness to feel. So the energies in my body were accumulated in a way that I was just left unfunctionable. And it happened like that I started crying out of nowhere, and I just cried and cried and cried and didn't know what happened to me. And then I got some support which gave me the framework of, you will feel everything what you have never be able to feel or wanting to feel. So I knew I had to surrender to everything what came up, and I laid on the ground, and it was very, very, very difficult to feel through, to let myself go through the waves of energy and emotions. But later, after 3 or 4 months, I say always, something stood up, some part of my consciousness stood up and was ready to feel everything consciously. And from this point, I was getting also support. I could more and more name the energies or the emotions which were coming up. And it was fear, it was guilt, it was shame, it was anger, it was sadness, it was everything what we don't want to have.
Mm-hmm.
These emotions which we judge as negative in our culture.
Yeah, and you are talking now about it. Could you name a little bit what sort of emotions they were and where they came from? I mean, you know, I know personally because I know you, yeah. But you know, people have had not so much heavy things, and still they think, you know,
Yeah.
What you are talking about is something which is more grounded in, let's say, our education or our way of seeing the world, which had been so far the fact. So could you give some examples of what has been so dangerous that you couldn't feel it?
And just for American folks, so
Yeah.
the education, you're not talking about schooling necessarily.
No,
You're
I mean
talking about
family
upbringing,
society. Yeah.
society.
Yeah, I can, yeah.
What do you say in English for that?
I don't remember.
It's good that you don't remember. so I feel I would more call it as an attitude. As an attitude to deal with the content, the emotional content in life. And in my specific situations, that were my parents' children in the Second World War. So, and when the Second World War was ended, nobody cared about these children because the adults cared about building up the country. So the children had been witnessing horrible things, and they didn't know how to deal with this. And in the outside world, in the adult world, there was no frame, no safety to go through, to speak about it, to just scream it out, or whatever way we deal today with traumatic content when people go through trauma or in war with refugees. We have many different ways of dealing with this today. Yeah, Mark, I see you want to say something.
No, actually, it's just my mouth half open.
So and nobody, since my parents didn't have any way to deal with that, they just decided to not feel anymore.
Yeah, I saw that in my parents too.
Yeah,
and they didn't speak about what has happened.
Yeah. So they grew up not having a space to talk about it, not a space to express it. So it stayed frozen in their system. And my mother, basically, I always felt she was frozen when she was 3. And when she was 3, she was born in 1941. So at the beginning of the war. And I don't know what she saw or what she witnessed. Her own mother died when she was 4. So I can just not guess what she went through. So, and then at home, it was basically a fridge. I grew up in a fridge. But I was very angry as a small child. But when I was angry, I was judged because there was no outside reason to be angry. It was just the atmosphere. And my parents would leave me alone when I was angry. So there was nobody stayed with me. And I learned when I'm angry, I'm left. Mm-hmm. So better not be angry. Better not be angry or sad or whatever. And when I was 13, I chose. I went into anorexia nervosa because I would grow up and something maybe was on the verge of expressing when I would come into pubertal age. So I decided I suppressed it because I was afraid if I express it, I will be left.
Sure.
And with 13, you still need your parents. So I suppressed my feelings through not eating, through controlling, to having absolute control over my body. And I froze my body. And I was the one then who was not functional from the view of my parents. And it was my way of dealing with this, what I could not name even in this time. It was something. And I felt if I would express that, everything would blow up.
But is it also a way to get attention finally from your parents?
I am not sure about that, because I was getting negative attention, what we all got.
Negative attention, but at
least better than none.
In the end, no, what I wanted is to be left alone. And I have, in the weekends, when there were weekends, I was the whole day out. I was not at home.
Mm-hmm.
I was not knowing how to be alive in this home. So I was alive in nature.
Mm-hmm.
This was for a long time my refugee. I went for long bicycle rides to just come home in the evening at the weekend, because at the weekend my parents were at home. You know, everyone was at home.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another thing, that I was so sensitive that I felt in danger, because I felt my father's suppressed anger. And I was not knowing what would happen if this anger would be set free. And in this culture where I was growing up, drinking was quite normal at the weekends, beer or wine. So I was afraid about this underneath these emotions, which I always felt. Maybe I even could not name, but I felt it. I was so afraid. So I was invisible. And I went out to not be at home. This is till I was 18, till I left home. And now I know, because I was getting the mirror anorexia, do you want to die? For me, it was a way I want to live, and I don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a way of, I would say, of surviving, of keeping my body functions minimal, but so I could survive and not feel, not take anything from this atmosphere in anymore, and not give anything out.
That makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
yeah,
not taking in, shutting the intake completely out to be safe. Yeah. That might be a new theory for anorexia, you know, for people who are a new way to look at it, let's say. That's interesting.
I think it's a way, because I had to study quite a lot later of anorexia, of psychological dysfunction. I now know for everything is a reason. And in my point of view, every psychological disease is a healthy reaction on something what is deeply unhealthy in the system.
Yeah,
I see it like that. Maybe it's unconventional, but when we look at that, and we look at every human being as inherently whole and complete, and every symptom has a reason, maybe we could find different ways of approaching certain labels.
And when you talk about system, you talk about the system of the person themselves, and then the family, and then the community, and then the whole world.
Yeah.
I like you mentioned you saw these as healthy reactions to unhealthy situations. You know, and that's very liberating, actually, for the person who's among other things, is feeling shame and guilt and all this negativity for not being a normal person somehow, and not functioning.
Yeah, and the book basically is for me, it's written as a ritual to step out of shame and unworthiness, to step out of these labels of psychological dysfunction, of everything what we name, because we are afraid to touch it, to connect with it and to see deeper. And the journey into the Unbroken Heart, I really realized the more I went through the emotional content, the less I identified with that. And something in me was being able to connect what was never broken. I first experienced it as a witness, as the part of myself which could observe the energy and the emotions I went through. But later, I would step more and more to this kind of acceptance and surrendering into my own heart, and I would connect something very loving, what would love first myself and would be able to embrace every emotion, everything what we call negative, till I was really felt that some shift also in my heart. And now I have contact with this part of myself which is unbroken, which is the connection maybe to the soul, which is loving, inherently loving, and was never broken. Because everything else were layers above it. Were emotional layers, and another emotional layer, and another emotional layer. So at the beginning, basically, of feeling, I was afraid to die, because the emotions were so high in my body that I just didn't know how to surrender to them, because it was so intense. And then I said, okay, I'm ready to die, in a way. And then I went through these layers, and the more I went through these layers, the more I became alive. And this was my question back to anorexia, because I was in this time sent to a hospital in northern Germany. And anorexia was still very new. It was 82. I think it was in 1982. It was not explored yet. So they didn't have a place for me. And I went into a department with, as I told, with leukemia, having children.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have hair. They were very touching for me, and they didn't have a choice to live. And I just felt I have a choice. I think I felt unconsciously I have chosen anorexia. Even I didn't say I choose now anorexia, but it happened. But I felt I had the possibility to live. And I wanted to become fully alive because I experienced so much death at my home, so much freezing, so much fridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know, it was just a decision. And I have the feeling it was a very, very deep decision, which was then influencing my whole life. And from that moment, basically, creativity became my doorway. I expressed, not in words, it was maybe still too dangerous, but in dancing, in painting, in whatever possibility I was expressing myself. And it was in this time also a coping mechanism still of proving myself that I am alive. It was still not authentic in the way I am alive and express freely. It was still a desperate expression about wanting to cope with that. And I see today it was my tool of staying alive and staying in some feeling of growing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to remind the viewers that on this page, thewisdomfactory.net, Elena Urbanovsky, there is the first recording. And there we show many of the pictures you have produced, let's say, into your book.
Yeah.
And the other thing, now you have words. We have read there one of the poems you have written, and there are a whole lot of others. And that was what really got me. I mean, now when I hear you speak, your story is completely different and alive. But when you just read it, and when it's touching, but then you talk about it, where it comes from, and more theoretical, I thought, it's nice. But when I began to read your poems, I thought, ooh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, me being the man, I'm relating much more to your talk today.
I can imagine.
I understand it much more better, more succinctly, more directly.
Yeah. I just want to show this one. As you see, it's the cover of my book, just for the audience again. And for me, it's a very symbolical one, because the wolf, the white animal, is for me the instinct, the instinctive part of me. And I call this picture basically instinctual love. There is something what has in me been waken up. I cannot not love anymore. I cannot cut the love. I cannot freeze the love. I can, and the red is for me, it's in my belly. It's really deep down. It's not even in my heart. It's in my belly. And it's this kind of feminine wisdom love, which loves everything, because you see the drama. You see the human drama, and you can just have compassion. I cannot judge any more negative emotions. I cannot judge any more people who lash out or who are angry, because we have all the reason to feel what we feel. It's just that I don't identify with that anymore. So I can come from a place of compassion, and I can come and respect the emotional state of everyone. I don't need to change it. And this is what I see collectively also, that we judge so much of these negative parts of ourselves, but there lies so much energy in them. If we would embrace them and accept them, then we have access to much more life energy. But judgment, I found out, energetically creates separation in our energy body. And the more we judge, the less we are connected to life, and we need to defend ourselves.
Yeah, and you find what you say. I find it so important, because we are used to judge others.
Yeah.
but actually we judge ourselves, and that's why we need to judge others. We don't really want to know that we are,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, I was recounting a dream this morning to Heidi, and I was this inquisitional, Sharia policeman, so to speak. And I was, attacking this woman, and is in a way that I never would in my waking life.
Yeah.
But the Sharia policeman is still within me.
Yeah.
It's there.
And the way to grow up is really to encounter all these parts, and especially the negative parts we think are negative. In this case, Sharia policeman might not be too positive, but we knowing that it is part of our being, then we can keep it under control, let's say. But when you don't know it and the situation arrives, then you would be. Oh, here we are back.
Yeah.
I think we didn't have internet for a moment, so I have to cut this out probably, unless you have said something important in the meantime.
No, you spoke. Do you see me now on the screen?
I see you. Yeah. No, we were out.
Yeah, because I don't see myself.
We see you.
Yeah, you're there.
Because I saw just you were speaking, you both together, and then you froze. So I didn't speak anything in between.
Maybe when you go on the top right, there is written gallery view or speaker view, then you might see something.
I have you in the right corner, and I have post attendee. So I'm not sure. Maybe I can join the same link again.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah. So maybe then I see myself also.
Stop the recording for a moment.
Yeah. Now.
Okay. You see us, so we can continue. We were cut right in the middle. Where were we?
That was I shouted, "Bam!"
Oh yeah, you shouted, and the internet went away.
You spoke about your dream.
Bipolar, yes.
But isn't that strange? I sometimes think a little bit, like magic. The first time we had the problem with the internet, and now we had this. Does it maybe mean that there is some averse energies who don't want to get this message out?
We violated some algorithm.
Who knows? It can be, of course, playing into that. But yeah.
Sometimes I'm playing with these things a little bit and see it as one possibility of. It's not. I don't see it as the truth and the only truth, but that there could be something which is still not wanting that this message goes out.
Basically, I really see more and more things possible the longer I live.
Yeah, they are.
Absolutely. Out of the box.
So let's go back to the stream we had before. I'm sort of out a little bit. What were we talking about? As soon as I think about tech problems, then my mind goes off.
Yeah. Well,
you talked about your dream with the policeman.
Yeah, the inner Sharia.
Yeah, but this was sort of ended. We were saying that if we don't know these parts in us,
then they can
be very dangerous for us and others.
I like Jordan Peterson's comment we also heard recently, that to be able to be a monster, but not be one.
That we need to know that we can be that and choose not to be it.
I want to come back maybe to speak about this regarding my journey, about how I was dealing with this abusive relationship, because maybe this plays into that I ended up in this abusive relationship, and I remember myself blaming this man. Really, I was the victim and he was the one who was guilty, the perpetrator. And this discussion is a lot today in society. Still very present. And for me, since I had this longing, this decision, I want to be alive when I was 14. Somehow I needed to ask different questions. And I was then asking, how did I create this relationship? Really, it was a very uncomfortable question, because one part of me didn't want to ask this question. It was easier to stay blaming, but I would never come into my authentic expression, which I see it's not anymore any reaction on anything. It's just my expression. So I asked this question, and I got the support then later, and I found out that there was an energetical part of my body unresolved related to the trauma in childhood, to emotional abuse. And the emotions are sitting in the belly region. So I attracted sexual and a relationship with sexual abuse, which happens in the navel region, and emotional abuse, to become aware of that. And it was very uncomfortable, because I said, you are responsible for my pain. Yeah, he was responsible for that. But it just didn't give me a sense of liberation. I was then always, still when we were separated, in my inner, dependent on him and his actions or what he said. So I decided to go deeper, and I felt this pain, and I felt the distortion, the patterns in my body, which were related to the emotional abuse as a child. And then in the end, I understood this man helped me to discover these parts of my body, which I didn't have access to before. Mm-hmm. So they came into my consciousness, but I didn't want to feel them. Mm-hmm. And as long as I blamed him and judged him, it was a defense mechanism not to feel. Mm-hmm. And when I say I'm ready, then I felt it through, and I had help in form of, I read Harry Potter, all 7 books, to connect with, or 8 books, to connect with Lord Voldemort, mm-hmm. with this dark power which lived in myself, this dark masculine, this unresolved part. And I read also from Stieg Larsson the Millennium Trilogy, which is a lot about politicians abusing women, all this very dark stuff which happens in the gut. And I would almost vomit from these books, but it is exactly the energy which I feel in connection to every part of our society on the globe till now, where the feminine or the women are abused, where this happens. It's a structural part, which was in my body too. And finally, it opened the doorway for me to embrace my own masculine shadow, to this, which is residing in all of us. And I know the Lord Voldemort in myself. I know the part which is so hating, just a cold killer. I could take the gun and kill. I know this part. But I love it now, because I see it's a defense mechanism.
And it is also knowing that you have it, that in the moment you would need it, this sort of energy, you could use it.
It's available.
Yeah. It's available. Why, when you are the victim of others, you never have access to the power. Really defend yourself. It's really amazing, and this is the antidote to chaos, as Jordan Peterson says, on the feminine way, to really embrace their own participation in the world, let's say, in the decisions we do, and then get empowered. As we said last time, you have changed so much that you can feel the empowerment, And if women knew how powerful they could be in a good way, not by screaming and the man, but by really embracing their own inner life, let's say, their own shadows.
And so, have you actually thanked this abusive person for?
I have said sorry in my book. There's one poem regarding that that I said sorry to him. Right. I don't have connection to him now, but I virtually saying I send him an email. Regarding. But it took time. It took really time, because it was such an automatic pattern of me. I am the victim. I am the woman. You are the abuser. You are the guilt. You are the perpetrator. And so it took a long time, because I was living in this frame 46 years. And I was judging men. There was a part in myself, and maybe we can make the transition time. I was inherently afraid of men. I had learned men are not human beings. This were the beliefs which I formed in relation to my father, who never showed any emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So I had never the possibility to relate to human men.
Mm-hmm.
For me, men are inhuman, are very cruel, were always punishing me, you know, not listening to me, judging what I say, a whole story.
What's she talking about?
Yeah. The thing is, I think the overwhelming number of women have this idea of how we live as women, and that the men are to blame for our, and that makes the life for men so difficult. And at this point, you wanted to talk about how men can deal with their situation, because as I know now, when with all these women, it's not empowerment, these women cry for I don't know what, but blaming men for their being, for their existence. Men, especially young men, they don't know what to do. They get blamed for almost everything, for being a man. I mean, what can he do? He is a man. So that is very, very, very difficult situation for a young man, no?
It is. And
you are not so young. You were also born as her mother.
Yeah,
in
the same
41.
year as your mother.
You're in 41.
Yeah. But in America, it's a little bit different, you know? So
we were not a defeated nation, et cetera, et cetera. We had no war on our shores and our land. But my father, of course, was in the war. And he was on a ship that was sunk. And had his share of difficulties. And of course, the stupid things happened in that furor of war and patriotism. He left his family of 5 boys, you know, and volunteered, you know, and he was old enough that he didn't have to, you know. And as left my mother, oh my God, what am I going to do? And she had a nervous breakdown and had to. It got sent back home to the relatives, so to speak. And the one thing that we had in common, or your parents and mine had in common, it sounds like, is that after the war, or near the end of the war, they got back together, and my mother reports, and we agreed never to speak of it again. And of course, that went beyond, you know, their relationship. That went on to that period of life, period. And I never learned about any of this stuff until I was adult, because it wasn't spoken of, you know? And in a very personal way, life with 4 brothers was kind of rough and tumble. And if I got any pleasant touch, it was from my mother, from no one else. Ever, you know, and after that disappeared by the time I was sort of school age, and that didn't happen anymore either. So I had no idea about actually, you know, relating to someone else. And then when women appeared in my life as a adolescent, I was only concerned with getting some good feelings from them. That was it. And that got expressed genitally, because I didn't know anything about nice touching, just pleasant snuggling or anything. I had no idea of that. And the girls were just a mystery. You know, they were not like me. There were times when I thought, these creatures are so nice. They're not like us boys at all. It'd be nice to be one. But then there'd be so many things that I couldn't do. And then, but there was a time when, and well, I shouldn't say there was a time, there was a long time, when I didn't really care who the girl was. I did not, you know, what can I get? What can I get? And this came out in the stereotypic way of being sexually aggressive, you know? And not, my first wife, I look back as, and that is, for me, it was a wonderful period. But I understand now that I didn't even know who she was. I didn't really know what she was interested in. She didn't express herself in any strong way, in any hobbies or interests, you know. She went to work. I didn't care what she was working at. It didn't matter. She was just...
As long as she was in bed with you.
That's really it. I mean, I was nice and pleasant to her personally, etc., but she wasn't quite a person.
Yeah, and that's where it comes that men behave in a certain way, as women behave in a certain way. It is really grounded in this not speaking, in this silence. No.
That was very slow coming to understand.
Yeah.
That women are people too.
Definitely.
Yeah, you talked earlier in this segment about your universal journey.
Yeah.
And this took me back to my college days when there was a theme. I studied literature, among other things, but a lot of literature. And there was a recurring theme of every man's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that was universal in those days.
Yeah.
Every man's journey.
Yeah.
And when anybody ever said, what about it, women or something? Well, it's understood that man includes women, of course, you know. Our journey is their journey.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not quite like that. But it's such a slow learning process.
Yeah, and for that, feminism, everything was really helpful to make understand that it's, excuse me, not only men giving the direction, that we are here too.
But
equally dysfunctional.
Sure, in the 60s, you know, equality of the sexes just meant that women could have sex when they wanted to, you know. But in the 70s, as feminism developed further, I began to see some worth in it. Like, oh my God, I hope they change the work world, because the work world is so crappy. You know, that was my experience as an employee, even at a professional level. It was just crap. And
also for men.
And that hierarchy was not, you know, just against women. It was all the way up, all the way down, wherever we were. But they didn't change the work world, so I never liked going to work. Never.
For me, it was very, very helpful to understand in this time that I, as a woman, also created this. You know, even if it's maybe a masculine, value-dominated world, I am part of the creation. Yes. I created this, so it's time that I overtake my part of the responsibility. And I'm not victim of a culture. I created it. So this was with even maybe unconsciously, you know, but it gives me the allowance then to say, okay, I have also somewhere in myself the power to create something different.
Sure.
Maybe I don't know this place in me yet as it was before, but now I know it. But this was very important for me, and especially the roles of the then of the mothers who educate the boys. You know, this was one part, but now I want to come to the evolutionary impulse now, because my journey brought me into the consciousness, not that I'm a woman, but that I'm a soul in a feminine body. And that means I have a feminine and a masculine part within me. And that means also that on some level, men and women have the same journey, as every human being is a soul in a human body. Yes. And at this moment, it gives me access to dealing with my masculine and my feminine part in a different way. And maybe I can notice they are in war within me, because in the outside it looks like that. And I can start to find the way to connect with these parts and explore them. And that means for me, the feminine part is the body and the emotional part. And I guess nowadays, as human beings, we are invited to accept our emotional part and to embrace it as part of us, to to see them as a gift and as life force. And I think men and women, as we speak about, in this way have the same invitation. Maybe through our conditioning, it's a bit different how men are entering or finding the way of connecting with the emotional body and the body. For women, it's maybe in some way easier because we are more conditioned to be social beings, emotional, caring, as we do for our kids. Mm-hmm. But I see the invitation is for both sexes the same.
The invitation is the same, but the task is different.
Yeah.
Because women have to be more assertive. I remember, for instance, I grew up and I went to university. My father said, you better study for a teacher, then when you have the children, you can come back into, so you are only a woman, so better you do certain things, you know. Yeah. And I always thought, I was let's say, still in the role of expecting the man to provide for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, and many women still do that. So you said we have chosen that patriarchy unconsciously. I think we have chosen it also consciously. It was the right thing to do at a certain point, you know, to be at home and do all the things. Division of work, you know, and it was not a suppression. Maybe then it ends up in a suppression. If somebody wants to study, as young women wanted to study 100 years and so ago, and then they found the no, then it begins to be an oppression. As soon as then women get more empowered and then get access to what before was only the domain of men, from that point on, we could do and be and embrace our feminine, our masculine possibilities. But the thing is, I think many of us are still caught into this. Yeah, actually, we would like the men earn the money for us because I'm too afraid of going out and be in competition. I'm too afraid of asking money for what I'm really good at and things like that. Yeah. I think this would be the part of the women, instead of blaming, but learning how to stand up for themselves and defend themselves, and not only defend, but propose something useful themselves by first, what you did, by first integrating these parts which are still screaming and which are still in fear and in agony, let's say.
Yeah, or paralyzed, whatever, But this is what I see. What I see, there is waking up in us this impulse of there must be more in women and men. We are getting unsatisfied because men are making the experience maybe also something is missing when I just function at work. I miss my inner life. I miss something in my inner, and also the women, like I came here not for that. I have to express much more. I think this is waking. This is where we get unfulfilled and we ask for more, and this more is not outside first or foremost. This more is inside. And at this point, I have the feeling now globally we start to speak more about that, and we need to understand that our feeling of not being fulfilled is not because we don't have enough money, we don't have enough whatever. It's because something inside is missing. And this is the beginning of the journey. In my case, I was thrown into this journey, you know. But I think collectively it happens now, and we see also that this awakening has to do with love and not with fight. Exactly. So we cannot fight our way against men into leadership. It's not a leadership then. We cannot. So we have to start from love, and first we have to love what is, even if we are not satisfied. But this is our creation. And if I don't love my creation, however dysfunctional it is, I will not step into my power, because it's an expression of my inner world. But we don't want to love or accept our creation. We fight against it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, tell us about it. Tell us men about it. Yes, you know.
Yeah, and I think. I don't know. I have no. In the last session, you asked about advice for men. I don't have an advice for men. Yeah. I would have a question. Who are you? Tell me about you.
Mhm.
What did you experience? How did you feel? What are your questions? You know, this is maybe the point where we can enter into co-creation.
Mhm.
When we don't know each other, we don't want to listen to each other, then there is no way of co-creating.
We obviously have had unconscious co-creation going on for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But now there's a possibility of doing it consciously.
Yeah.
Depends upon the world around us changing too.
Yeah.
If we're just by ourselves talking to each other or a few people, the world is not going to change by that. How to bring it out into the world is a huge problem. And of course, nobody wants to change until they're ready to change. And if the old ways are working, I mean,
sort of working.
Sort of working. It seems like it. I mean, people who've grown up in a traditional way, the man's going to say, "Oh, what's the problem?" Huh?
Unless they get all sorts of illnesses, blood pressure, heart disease, and whatever, which could all be signs that something is not so working as it could.
But he may be blaming others for that, but he's not going to see that it's his own creation.
No.
I mean, mostly we wake up through crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And crisis, when you look at the translation, is a turning point.
Mm-hmm.
And that means if crisis is nothing negative, it's just a big question opening up, then maybe we can also embrace this. And also, what I notice is the mostly we need a crisis to be open for new ways. But there comes a certain moment when we have gone long enough where we are happy to learn new things, where we want to integrate new things, where we want to eat healthier because we feel, oh, it's better for my body, I'm more alive. So, but there seems to be this doorway into get it moving, which is in most of the time a crisis. In my life, was it this breaking down? In others, is it a terminal illness, loss of a job, death of a loved one? There are a lot of things going on. Catastrophes, floods, hurricanes, whatever. We have a lot of support for change. We have a lot of support for growing.
Yeah.
And I like this picture of a small child. A small child cannot not grow.
Yeah.
Yep.
We adults, we thought at a certain point, we are outgrown, we don't need to learn anymore, everything is fine, and now everything breaks down.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to what you have expressed before, that every catastrophe which we encounter, we think it's a catastrophe, but when you see it from the right lens, is an invitation for life.
Yeah.
And so the main thing which we could say is the goal of what we are talking now is to inspire people to see these things which happen in their life from a different perspective, and to embrace, but as you said, the catastrophe or the crisis or whatever, instead of trying to get out, But it's so strong, the trying to hide and to flee from what is coming from outside, instead of really wanting to do the hard work. Who wants to work hard?
Not me. No, please.
For me, the nice thing is in that, because I have the feeling when we understand that our life is our creation, we are not depending on anyone else. And we have so much power or possibilities then to create. And it gives a sense of, it gives a huge opening. And I think deeply inherent, there is a place which longs for that. And I think in the way, maybe when we speak now like that people can also understand that in everyone is this longing to be free. For me, this is an inherent impulse. Everyone has it.
Yeah.
It's part of us as human beings. And when we can see these catastrophes or crises as part of the way towards this liberation, then we can get so much empowered, because it's up to us and not up to any politician, to any authority. And I think, wow, I can start here now. I don't need to anything buy for it. Anywhere go for it.
Yeah, but you are quite in contradiction to the mainstream, what is going on now, is the global victimism, let's say, of both parts, you know, of everybody. Even, I mean, the politicians, one is victimizing the other, and everybody feels disempowered. And what you are saying is the empowerment doesn't come from, let's say, legal power or military power, although that plays a big role in our lives, unfortunately. But the real power to meet this is not even big demonstrations, although they have also a role, because they say that there's something off. But the real power is that everybody in us is empowering themselves from the inside, because you know when you feel empowered and you know when you don't, you know. So there are certain symptoms of expression.
Like when you tell the truth.
Like when you tell the truth, and when you tell the lie, you feel there is something in you is knowing that there is a lie, you know. So we have ways to understand when we are really powerful people, or when we are solely trying to do power in this way, you know, hitting others. So that's all an invitation to empower every single person. And
yeah, and I think that the smallest impulse is to start loving and accepting yourself. I think it's the very first step.
And the most difficult.
Yeah, and to accept your anger, your sadness. And I think sadness is a deep issue, because there's so much sadness, so much to cry about. But when I allow myself to be touched, something happens. And I don't need to push the things away. And it's a process. It's a process, and everyone has a different velocity, a different time for it. But it's the first step, how I can love myself a little bit more every day. And then when we do that, and in myself, it's also a form of practice. Twice a day, I meditate. And I connect and I feel what is inside my belly also. And I say, welcome fear, welcome anger, welcome joy, whatever is there. And like this, I'll cultivate a sense of attention towards myself and self-worth. I'm worth enough for myself, that I embrace myself with what I feel, with how I look. And this is accumulating. And the more I do that, the more I love my surroundings. The more I do that, the more I can love another human being. And I can speak in a loving way with another human being. And I meet other human beings. And it's, in some sense, it's simple. I'm now also doing workshops, but workshops is just one practice. It's the same as if I embrace my daughter when she's angry. There's no difference. My head wants to make a difference. Workshop and earning money is more important than maybe, you know, embracing another human being who is in pain or who is having a bad day. And then I get authentic, because there is no any difference if I do a workshop with 10 people, with 100 people, or if I embrace my daughter, or if I meet a neighbor and she tells me the story of her day. And then I feel empowered, because I don't change anymore. And I don't change anymore the priority when my priority is loving myself and others. And it seems to be profane, but it's very profound.
And the most difficult thing to do in the world, because we have learned to be outside directed and not inside, and to blame we Germans, for sure. And only yesterday, when we were for the walk in the park, I was saying that's the next big hurdle I have myself, is really to accept myself for not being always perfect, you know, for having this, and not always pushing myself. Now you have to do that, and you have to do that, and actually allowing myself. We do meditation too, but still meditation is run often by this. It must be good.
It must be a good meditation. Yeah.
So what I have learned as a meditation from my teacher Panache is sitting down with my palms up, a straight spine, and just breathe and feel into my body, nothing else. And accepting, like welcoming, being present to what is in my body, and whatever it is.
So you would say, here I feel anger, here I feel this.
Let's say in my belly I feel anger. Then I breathe into this anger. And when I breathe and I put my conscious attention there, things start to move. Maybe from the belly, it moves into my heart. Then I breathe into my heart. And like this, I keep the life energy moving. And at a certain point, it's just gone.
That's wonderful.
And the loving attention, the witness, the inner consciousness, I through coming there with the light of my consciousness, I shine the light of love there. Mm-hmm. And it's very soft. And it's always in connection with my body. Always. Because my body is the part which is your emotion. And we feel always emotions. We get always triggered. And instead of judging, I breathe into that.
And this is the other thing which I have understood very deeply, that we will never end.
Exactly.
We think we work now and then it will be fine and we don't have to do anything. That will always be a journey, and it will always be better, let's say better, if there is a better, and worse, but it will always change. And so, for instance, when once in meditation you came very deep, and now you expect every time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Or the thinking, you have learned you don't have to think while you meditate, and now you find yourself thinking about, I don't know, going for shopping or something like that. Hey, you shouldn't think about that. Blah, 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 blah. So what would you say to in this occasion?
Now, I would say to this, what I practice, and also having gone through this big challenge to this journey, is like I breathe. No matter what happens, I breathe. And it's still a conscious practice, because sometimes I don't think about it. But the more I do that, the first thing was liberating the emotions which were stuck, from the past. Now I don't have this anymore. Now the emotion come and go. And when I keep on breathing and meditating in this way, they don't get stuck, because I feel them consciously through. In this way, it gets better, because I'm not anymore so emotionally triggered as I was before. So the emotions are not having the intensity, because they are underneath that is nothing from the past. And it's the same with the thoughts. My thoughts come and I say, welcome, because they're anywhere there. I don't have control over them. But I can just let them run through. And when I focus my consciousness on the breath in the body, the thoughts come when they come. And then when I notice that, I let them flow through, and I connect again consciously with my breath in my body. Exactly. And this is the practice. And the more I do it twice a day, the more I have this also during the rest of the day in this position. And it gets more and more connected. So I can breathe on the bus station. I can breathe when I stand in the shopping. I can breathe when I don't know what to do in my workshops. I breathe. Because I'm leading my workshop. I have a plan, but mostly we go somewhere else. And I'm now familiar with the unknown. I don't know what to do. Okay, I breathe. and the more energy is liberated in my body, the stronger my intuition gets. Mm-hmm. So I get the impulse through my body, what's next. So we do this is next at the workshop. I don't know where we go, but I'm not anymore afraid to feel. Mm-hmm. I remember the workshops which I did in the past. I don't know what to do. My breath stopped. Everything stopped. Everything broke down. And now I just breathe, because breathing is always in the moment. I cannot breathe in the past. I cannot breathe in the future. And the more I do that, the more and more liberation just happens. Mm-hmm. And in my personal case, my husband is still believing we are in a catastrophe. He doesn't see the birth. He sees the destruction of the old. And he's suffering very much, because he doesn't have access to a conscious framework, how to be empowered in that. And the fact is mostly that the nearest people don't want to listen from you. So he doesn't want to listen. What I can do, I can breathe. I can practice not to know it better, and to love him how he is at the moment. And it would have been horrible in the past. I would have judged him till the top of the roof, trying to change and fix him, and he must function, he must be there for me, blah, blah, blah. But I can see now he gave me the space for over 3 years that I could go and come out at the other side. And now the energy is so high in myself that everything breaks down what was not in alignment with my energy. And he is in a breakdown. But now I have a frame. I don't need him to rescue me. I don't need him emotionally to be there for me, because this is what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can hold the space for him and allow him his own tempo. And I also don't need to leave him because he doesn't function how he should.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have compassion for the growth. Mm-hmm. And I can support him best in holding the space with love and respecting his way and loving him. I mean, if you would have said this to me 5 years ago, but this is the discussion nowadays. Women want to leave the man because he's not giving them what they want. And we are now collectively, everyone will need to step into self-love, into conscious love for him or herself. And when you see that, I notice there's also maybe some part of the time where relationship is not possible because the relating to self is most important. So in my case, in our family, it's like this. I have the feeling we all practice self-love. And the container, maybe I can be the container because I have gone through and I know what does it mean to learn to love the self, which we deemed unlovable. Yeah. You know, and this is where I can be present, as in the workshops, I can be present in my family and allow the emotional part to be integrated. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy, but I have no choice anymore. There is this part of me, there's still this, I would call it egoic identification with some. I want finally a husband who is present, but he needs to be present for himself. And this is why I said last time, maybe we women, we were more forced into dealing with these things first because we suffered more. Mm-hmm. And now when we are conscious women, we can allow the men the space to find out who they are and catch up.
Thank you.
I guess you are already very conscious when I see that, but in the surround, and this is what I do with men when they come to my workshops. I embrace them and allow them with respect to explore their feminine emotional part. And they are still not the majority are still women, but they welcome the men, and we honor the men who are going this way.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful, and no matter how imperfect they are, we are. And this is where the beauty comes in. Because the beauty comes into imperfection. Say, I'm imperfect, you are imperfect. You are vulnerable, I am vulnerable. Wow, we can be in this together.
Mm. Can I tell a story about you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because she is a perfectionist. She really expects herself to do very, very well.
Yeah.
And when we were first together, I thought, she doesn't do anything wrong. You know, of course, this may have been the blinders of first love in part, but eventually it became really problematic because she didn't do anything wrong. And finally, she did. And I was so happy. I laughed and I
was so angry. You compliment me for having done an error?
Yeah. Well, that relieved me from being perfect too, of course. But.
I'm now, when you say that, because I know Adelheid is German, I'm too German. And also in Norway, in Slovakia where I lived, the Germans are known for being perfect. But I have not explored this till the end, but I touch upon it in my book, is the double bind of being victimized in the war and at the same time being the perpetrator because Germany started the war. Mm-hmm. And there's something where Germans specifically are having much difficulties to feel sadness. For me, this is a collective one. Anger is easier than sadness. And there is maybe, I'm not sure if this perfectionism is rooted in this wanting to excuse.
Mm-hmm. That's a good
for the perpetration in the war. Mm-hmm. At the same time, coupled with the not allowance to feel certain feelings, and to acknowledge them. So maybe there is something in it, because we are so perfect and so technical perfect.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of brands in the world, German brands in electronic, which are appreciated. And I meet it in Norway, I meet it in Slovakia, and this stereotype, Germans are over perfect.
Yeah.
And maybe it's rooted there. I'm not sure, but there was some resonance now coming.
It's for sure being reinforced by this situation. But I think we have that correctness and perfectness in our genes for long.
So now Germany's going to be perfect with the immigrants.
Yes, I
Yeah.
hope so.
Well, that was kind of the thrust of.
Anyway, this comes to a good end
Yeah.
now, and I want to remind the viewers that they can download the book of Elena with these wonderful paintings and this wonderful poetries in thewisdomfactory.net/Elena-Urbanovsky. I hope you can read that. And I will also publish it on the YouTube in the description so that they can find it. And at that point, Elena, thank you that we could deepen this conversation, because I think we should go on with it.
Maybe we do a regular monthly or whatever, we see.
Do stay in touch, y'all. So I would
thank you very much for your inquiry and for inviting me into this discussion. I always have loved to talking with you.
Yeah,
because there's so much going on.
Me too.
It's a beautiful
so much going on.
Space.
Ever more.
And we hope to see you here in Paradiso Integrale in Italy again.
Yeah, I hope so.
Bye for the moment.
Bye-bye.